Welcome back to The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering real, actual insights you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees. This is my equally talented co-host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. She and I make it a point every week we meet on Wednesdays to bring you the truth about the plant in 20 minutes or less. This is something we're both super passionate about. We both have studied the plant a lot. And Dr. Ryman, you get to tell them why we're here and why it's so important to us from your point of view.
We are here because it can be so difficult to find good, reliable, accurate information about cannabis on the internet. You may have a really important question, you Google an answer, or perhaps you ask ChatGPT, and you may get 100 different responses, many of which completely contradict each other or are pulled from sources that are unreliable. So, how do you know the truth? Well, that's where we come in. We are here to give you evidence informed, actionable insights on how to use cannabis safely and effectively, answering some of your most important questions about the plant, its history, what it does and does not do to your body and your brain in about 20 minutes. So you can get the information you need and get on with your day. You can think of us as your really cool aunties or your kick ass granddaughters, the women in your life who always tell you the truth.
That's right. And we have a pretty giant library at this point. We have a giant library of episodes for you to check out. So we try to bring you topics that we think are important. We always ask our audience topics that they want to hear. So this episode is going to be a little different. It's going to be a kind of a culmination of a lot of our topics, but it's going to be fun. You know, they say that like hindsight is 2020. So, and many of us, like the Gen X community, we've been using cannabis for over half our lives. And so what have we learned, right? There are the newbies out there, whether you're 21 or you're 61. Listening to the lessons from your cannabis elders is a great way to maximize benefits and reduce harms. So, in this episode, we're going to get nostalgic and we're asking ourselves, what are things that we wish we knew about cannabis before becoming consumers? So, this is where Dr. Ryman and I get to tell stories about things that we wish we knew. And so, if you have your own wish you knew before cannabis, you can always send us a line at info at my personal plants. But Dr. Ryman, what's something that you wish you knew before trying cannabis for the first time?
Well, one of the things I kind of had to learn by trial and error was that edibles are a lesson in patience and dosage. So that was and still is the number one thing I hear from people that are former consumers. And they'll say, I tried cannabis, it was okay. And then I had a brownie, a cookie, something at a party, and I got way, way too high and I had an anxiety attack. And now I can't even get near cannabis because it starts to make my heart race. How long will this last? And so those initial edibles experiences, if not done properly, can leave an imprint on you that can affect the rest of your cannabis consuming career. So, Christina, how about you? Do you have a funny story about edibles?
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say, when we talk about edibles, there's two different kinds because in our era, we didn't have dispensaries, or at least I didn't have access. So a lot of my edibles that I ate were homemade, and those don't have a label. And those, you don't know the dosage. And so it's sort of eat at your own risk. And depending on who's making it, you could really be in for a ride. I remember I like to make brownies. And the story I'm going to tell is I always am the one that checks the brownies for. I try to get it dialed in, like I know about what it's going to be, but just in case before I give anybody a brownie, I always try it. Um, I don't have any of my own. I've always been pretty good about finding my dosage, but I have a friend who's a chef and he makes his own. I mean, we're talking like gourmet. Like I make brownies, it's not gourmet, but he made these gourmet bars, gave them to me, and I said, any instructions? And he's like, no, no, you're good. So, and they're already like cut up in little squares. So I assume he's dosed it out. He's good to go. So I eat a square. It was not good. I ended up curled up in a ball in my bed, like lights out. Nobody talked to me and just had to like let it wear off. So now I don't take anybody else's edibles unless they have a label or I know them and I can trust them, or I just make my own.
Well, that's a great point about homemade edibles because for some newer consumers, they may not be going to dispensaries. And so their first interaction with an edible might be a tray of brownies or cookies that someone brings to a party. And to your point, edibles can impact people differently. Even people that are regular cannabis smokers might find that edibles impact them differently. So just because your friend says just, they're dosed 1 dose per brownie, what is a dose for them may be very different than what is a dose for you. The other big thing people should know is that traditional edibles, and we're going to talk about the difference between traditional and nano in a minute, take 45 minutes to up to 2 hours to kick in. And because a lot of times they're folded into sweets, it can be very tempting to eat more. I don't feel anything, so I'm going to eat more. And then all of a sudden it hits you and it's too overwhelming. So the start low, go slow definitely applies to edibles. If you're able to get a product from a dispensary, at least you know what the milligram content is on that. And for newer consumers, we recommend starting at like 2 milligrams of THC in a dose until you know how it hits you. Now, I said traditional edibles will take up to 2 hours for you to feel it. Nano emulsified edibles will take 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to feel it. And this is because the THC does not have to pass through the liver in order for you to feel the effect. So unlike digesting food traditionally, how edibles were processed, this goes pretty much straight into your bloodstream. So not only are you going to be able to feel the effect right away, it's actually going to be a bit of a milder effect because it isn't passing through the liver. So the takeaway, avoid homemade edibles. Even if people tell you this is fine, eat one, it's not that strong, because that strong may be different for them than it is for you. And if you get an edible from a dispensary, start with about 2 milligrams of THC and find a nano emulsified edible if you can, which are the fast acting ones. All right. So speaking of dispensaries, another thing that we figured out, I have been using cannabis for a long time before dispensaries came on, and I found that dispensaries can be overwhelming, even for cannabis consumers. So my experience was I grew up in the Midwest during Prohibition. I had never been to a dispensary until I moved to California in 2002 and became a medical cannabis patient. And at this time, I'd already been using cannabis for a while. I was an experienced consumer. The first time I walked into a dispensary, like my mouth hit the floor and I couldn't speak for a few minutes because I had never seen such an array. I mean, the idea of being able to decide which strain you want was completely foreign to me because I was used to whatever the guy had, that's what you bought. Seeing all of these edibles in this nice packaging was something I had never seen before. And now, you walk into a dispensary, there's so many brands, there's so many options. It can be really, really overwhelming. And Christina, I know you're in North Carolina and you all are now just kind of seeing this happen with hemp dispensaries and all the products that are available there.
Yeah. Well, I would just tag on to that to say, my first time in the dispensary was the same. And I always equate it to like a kid in a candy store because it's like everything looks so good. And it's like, I want it all. But it also was overwhelming in a sense of like, I didn't know a lot of the new lingo. And depending on which dispensary you go to, some dispensaries, you can just go in and ask for what you want, kind of thing. I've been in some that are like a convenience store, and I was like, really? They just let us pick it out. And some are more like in Vegas, I know everything's sort of like behind. You just pick out what you want and they go get it from the back. So nothing's out on the shelf. So you can't really see it and touch it without someone next to you. So what I would add to that is it's okay to not know going into the dispensary. And usually the bud tenders are there to help inform you. And they're pretty good at helping with, if you say, I want something for sleep, or I want something for anxiety, or I want something, they're there to help you with that. So I wouldn't be afraid going into a dispensary. Just maybe go in with a plan of like knowing, do I want a smokable? Do I want an edible? Do I want a tincture or topical? So that kind of narrows your decision down. But yeah, it's very difficult here in North Carolina because we don't have access, and I work with a lot of patients and people who want to use it therapeutically. And the problem with that is we don't have any products that I can send them to. I can't say go and get this product with this dosage. And also, a lot of people here are buying from the black market, and they're also buying Delta 8 and hemp products that may or may not be safe.
So I would add on to that a lot of dispensaries have online menus. So
You're
something
right.
you may want to do before you even go in is look at the online menu and kind of get a sense of what products they have. And then when you do go to a dispensary for the first time, bring a friend, bring a granddaughter, bring a niece, bring an auntie, bring someone close to you that does know a lot about cannabis. Because even though there are bud tenders out there that are quite knowledgeable, you never know. And if you're asking the person behind the counter, like what's a good product, they may be thinking about what's good for them, which may be totally different than what's good for you. And if you are trying to treat a very specific medical condition with cannabis, then I recommend reaching out to a cannabis nurse or a health practitioner before you go to find out more about what product might be right for you. Because not only can bud tenders not give medical advice because it's against the law, but that's not the kind of consumer they're used to dealing with. So you may not get the information you need. So knowing as much as you can before you go is always a good idea. All
Love
right.
that.
Let's move on to the vibe matters more than I thought, AKA the impact of set and setting. So this is a really important one, even for experienced consumers, because you might find that how cannabis hits you, the effect that it has, can vary greatly on how you're feeling that day, where you are. Cannabis can feel differently sitting on the couch watching a movie than it does at Burning Man or Coachella because of the energy around you. And I think that this is really important because if you're the kind of person that gets anxious in crowded, chaotic spaces in general, cannabis may not be the right thing for you to choose in that environment, especially if you're not used to using it.
Yep. I know a lot of people like to use it when they go to festivals and concerts, not thinking that, there can be an impact on there. And more today, you always see people at concerts or festivals that, took too much, in your mind. I will say for me, I had an experience like going to a party where I thought it was going to relax me and I was going to be able to have a good time. And instead it like was anxiety inducing and overwhelming. And just with all the people and talking and voices and music, and it was like I have to get out of here. So set and
And that
setting
can happen.
100%. Wish I would have known that.
And, I would say that if you are with someone, then this is happening to them. And we have a whole episode about what to do if the person you're with takes too much THC. But if you're with someone at a party or a concert or somewhere and they start to get anxious, there are some things you can do. Take them to a quiet space away from all the noise and the chaos, get them something to drink, non-alcoholic, get them something to eat, sit with them, if you're able to kind of put on TV or music or something that's going to be kind of a distraction. There's some grounding techniques that people can use because sometimes you can feel a little bit disassociated from your body. And just assure them that this will pass. They're not in any physical danger, that they're going to start to feel better really soon, and just kind of be a comfort to them because I think that anxiety can be really scary. And so helping somebody feel safe and comfortable is the best way to get them.
Yep, I agree.
But if you're somebody who's like, all right, so I get it and I want to try cannabis, but I'm afraid of THC and I'm a little bit nervous that the product's going to be too strong. And we had an episode on potency. We've had episodes on CBD. We've had episodes on being afraid to try cannabis. So another thing I wish I knew was that there's so much more to cannabis than just THC. THC gets a big focus because during Prohibition, that was kind of what you were paying for. But now that we have access to all kinds of products, there are over 100 cannabinoids in cannabis, not just THC, and we're just learning about some of the new ones. So, Christina, are there some cannabinoids besides THC that you found helpful?
Yes, I think CBD is one of my favorites because when I first heard about CBD, it was like snake oil. It was being sold in gas stations, and I'm like, there's no way that that is legit. And so I did some research on it. I actually met a doctor who was using CBD in lieu of opioids for his patients to help them not use a pain medication or maybe use less of it. And I was very intrigued. And I actually had him on my podcast and started researching it. And I was very fascinated. And I said, well, and he had a product. We later became partners and we now have a company called Physician Selected together. But I said, I'm going to have to try this stuff if it is what you say it is. And for the first time, I tried CBD and did not get high. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was life changing, because I don't like to get high and go to the moon. And I'm not one of those that can function on high doses of THC. I'm pretty much just like, just check me out for the day. So for me, CBD changed my life. And I know CBN, CBG, what's the other one?
CBC, THCV, all the acid forms of THC and CBD and CBG, which none of those are psychoactive. There are so many different components of the plant. And unfortunately, in the recreational market, we have a hard time finding products that are not just very high in THC. And if you're somebody who's out there who's like, I really want to try cannabis, but I don't want to get too high. I want to smoke a joint, but I don't want to be to the moon, as you say. What I suggest, and what we've talked about on this show, is to find some really nice hemp flower that is less than 0.3% THC, but has high levels of CBD, and then mix it with a little high THC flower. Kind of make your own little herbal concoction and smoke that, because you're actually going to get much lower dose of THC. It's going to be way more balanced between THC and CBD. And you probably know what I'm going to say next, Christina. Tinctures, my favorite form of consumption. And a lot of times you can find tinctures in different ratios. So you can find a 50-to-1 CBD THC, or as I've mentioned, we give my dog a 1-to-1-to-1 THC, CBD, CBG for his skin. And so there are a lot of options in playing around with different cannabinoids. Once you get past the flower and once you get past the edibles, I take 600 milligrams of CBD every day via tincture, and I don't get high at all. I don't feel psychoactive. It is anti-inflammatory. It's very effective for the condition I'm using it for. And so I'm really lucky that I have access to that kind of product. So speaking of different ways to ingest cannabis, and we've talked about edibles, we've talked about smoking, we've talked about tinctures. Another thing that we've learned is that not all methods of consumption are created equal, that not all doses are created equal, and that there are safer and smarter ways to use cannabis. So, Christina, why don't you talk them through microdosing?
Microdosing is my favorite topic because, on this show, we talk a lot about the therapeutic effects of the plant. And I wish more people knew that it doesn't take a whole lot of THC to actually get some results, or get an effective dose. So microdosing is just the minimum effective dose for whatever you're trying to treat. And that could even be just general anxiety for the day. It could be, I just want to relax, right? And I don't want to go to the moon. So, I love there's Mr. Moxie's makes some awesome mints that are very low dose. I think everyone should have those in your pantry. They're great for hangovers, because you don't get high and it just takes you back to homeostasis. So, what about you? No.
I think minimum effective dose is such a good strategy. And it also comes with it intentionality. So, cannabis is a very powerful tool. But when you're trying to fix something, you just don't randomly grab whatever tool your hand happens upon in the toolbox and just start hammering away. You look and see, what am I trying to fix? What is the right tool for the job? And how much power do I really need to put behind this? It takes a lot less power to hammer in a teeny tiny little nail than it does to take and screw something into a steel wall. So I think that really understanding your intentions of use and what you're trying to get out of use is going to help with your dose. It's also going to help you with your method of ingestion. So inhalation is great because you feel the effect right away. So if I am in pain right now, or I am nauseous right now, or I'm having a seizure right now, inhalation is going to be my best bet, whether that's smoking or vaporizing, because that cannabinoid is going to hit my brain right away. And that is going to give me immediate relief. If I'm looking for something that's going to last longer, so maybe I have arthritis pain and I'm going to be walking around all day and I want something that's going to last all day, then edibles might be a better choice, because those have a longer lasting effect. And it may not be easy for me to use inhalation when I'm on the trail or somewhere, out in public. So really, safety in cannabis comes with intention, figuring out what that minimum effective dose is, and then what is the right method of ingestion to achieve the results that you're looking for. But I think, we would be remiss if we did not include on this list one of the risks associated with cannabis, because we've been talking about a lot of the benefits, and there absolutely are a lot of benefits. But one of the things I think that it's important for folks to understand is that it's kind of a double swing door, in and out door, when it comes to mental health. So, some people find that cannabis really helps with anxiety, that it really helps with depression. We have evidence of cannabis being helpful for PTSD, especially nightmares, because THC suppresses REM sleep, which is where dream activity happens. So a lot of folks have found relief from mental health symptoms using cannabis. However, for other people, cannabis can exacerbate symptoms. It can make them feel more depressed or more anxious. And this can be true for the same person depending on the day. So you mentioned, Christina, that, cannabis, you've used it to relax, you've used it to reduce anxiety, but that one time that you were at this party where there was a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stimulation going on, it actually had the opposite effect.
Yep.
So
100%.
especially high THC content, and we've talked about potency on this show, that can trigger mental health symptoms and issues in people that are predisposed to these types of issues, that have experienced these issues in the past. So all this is to say that if you're someone out there who has experienced mental health disturbance, or it runs in your family, or you're currently on medication for mental health issues, cannabis doesn't mean it's off the table for you. It just means that there should be some care taken in the decision to consume cannabis. And whether that means talking to a doctor or some other health professional, or starting very, very slowly with maybe a non-psychoactive form of cannabis like CBD, great care should be taken. One of the things I like to say that I heard somewhere, I'm not going to say that I made this up myself, but cannabis is for anyone, but not for everyone. And if you have a friend and you're like, hey, we should, get high or take edibles and go to the park, and they're like, cannabis is just doesn't sit well with me, I just don't have a good reaction to it. The correct answer to that, or response to that, is not, oh, well, you just haven't tried the right strain, or you haven't tried the right product, or, well, here, let me give you something that I really like. The correct response to that is, okay, and just respect it, because it's not the kind of thing that everyone enjoys. And if you enjoy it a lot, that's great, but that shouldn't mean that everyone around you also has to feel the same way.
It's true. I love it. Well, everyone, thanks for hanging out with your cool aunties for the last 20 minutes. And hopefully we shared some knowledge with you about the things that we wish we knew about cannabis before we tried it for the first time. That may help you before you try it for the first time. Or if you're, a current user, maybe you learned some things that you didn't need. So again, whether you're kind of curious, you're seasoned, or you're just trying to understand what the hype about this plant is all about, just know that this plant is powerful, it's personal, and it's full of potential. It's not about judgment. It's not about learning. I said it is about learning and making informed choices. So if this is an episode that made you think, or it sparked curiosity, please share it with someone who might need it, who may need to hear it, might want to see it. Or you can always drop us a line at info@mypersonalplants. We love your questions. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube Garden of Wisdom. You'll find tons of episodes there, lots and lots. We call it the Garden of Wisdom because there's just lots and lots of information. So until next time, stay curious, stay open, and always live your best plant-powered life.